Welcome to Special Events of 2015. I am your host, Lindsey Williams. This DVD is being made because of phone calls that many of you placed to the Prophecy Club and emails that you made to lindseywilliams.net. And you were requesting dates, events, details. Some people, I gather, must think that I enjoy talking to the elite. Let me assure you, I really don't. And I hesitate to pick up the telephone or to go to the email and contact these people personally. Oftentimes, I find out things I don't want to know, and things that, believe me, honestly, you don't want to know either. But after your phone calls, I felt obligated to do the best I could to get the information that you want. Now, I must admit that I did this against my better judgment. I had already contacted the elite, as you remember, and in my previous presentation, the elite had already told me everything that they wanted me to know. Now, understand how I stated that. Everything that they wanted me to know. Understand, of course, that these people are concerned about me as much as they are you. And we're talking with the older elite. Well, I did. I did just what you requested. I sent an email to my elite friend. It was in the evening, if I remember correctly. And the next morning, I did not expect to get an immediate answer. But to my amazement, when I checked my emails, there it was. Now, it wasn't the normal answer or email that I would get. You see, usually the elite are so busy, they have so much to do, they don't have time for details, and sometimes they help me and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they really get rather disgusted that I ask questions. Well, you have to remember the power and the prestige of these people. Well, the next morning I received probably the most lengthy email that I have ever received from my elite friend, and I had asked him the question, please tell me everything that you're willing to tell me about 2015 because there are some people who want to know. The next morning, when I looked at that email, I was stunned. The answer was immediate. He didn't hesitate at all. And what was said to me was, I must admit, almost startling beyond my imagination. And so you're going to find this DVD very unusual in that I didn't expect what I got. Why didn't I want to contact my elite friend? Well, let me try, if I may, by explaining to you some of what I've learned over the years. Let's go back, if I may, not to the elite, but to the Bible itself. In the Bible, in Genesis 1:1, it says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." Now, this is talking about the supreme creator of all of this universe. Do you realize that nowhere in the Bible does it ever attempt to prove the existence of a God? It merely states a fact, but it doesn't give details. Let's think about something else. Not only is it God's existence, but the Bible goes immediately into creation. And it talks about what He created on the first day, the second day, the third day, and what God did. It doesn't give details how He did it. He doesn't tell the exact date that it happened. And a lot of things that you and I would expect a divine being to give, He just doesn't give. Now, the elite are not divine. They're not God. They likewise don't explain details most of the time. And my elite friend had told me, cycles of 7, He had talked about blood moons. They had gone into all the things that I gave previously, and I was satisfied not to know certain things. Just like we have to be satisfied that God doesn't tell us certain things in the Bible either. And even if we ask, we normally don't get answers. Well, I'm not comparing God to the elite, and they're not the same by any stretch of the imagination. But I find that over these 37 years, I've learned to try to understand these people the best I can. Now, I must admit to you that there are some things that I can't understand. Now, I've been trying. I've been trying for 37 years to be able to contemplate these people, understand their thinking, and I immediately, when I received this email, I realized that I didn't want to interpret what this person was saying incorrectly. And I don't want to tell you wrongfully what he's saying. Now, why did I hesitate wanting to contact my elite friend? First of all, I knew that it could cause me a lot of worry. I hope you understand this. I have trouble sleeping at night sometimes just like you do when I know certain things. And oftentimes I know a whole lot more than you know. In fact, I know a whole lot more than 99% of all the newsletter writers out there, and even the commentators on television, because they only know what their upper echelon are telling them. I know what the upper echelon of all of the elite are saying, and I don't really sometimes want to know what they're trying to say. In fact, sometimes it frightens me to even think about the fact that I might need to go back to them and ask them a question. But there again, so many calls had come in from really concerned individuals that want to be able to live a happy life in 2015 until Sean at the Prophecy Club kept saying to me, "Chaplain, people are calling and asking for details." Now, I was not given those details originally. And so for me to go back and ask them, I had not the slightest idea of the answer I was going to get. But I was afraid that it might not necessarily be what I wanted to hear. Let me try, if I may, to explain to you. I have to do this in order for you to understand all the details of what this man gave me. Let me try, if I may, to explain the mindset of the elite. Now keep in mind that since I was about 47, 48 years of age and had experience with those people back in those days, all of these years I have tried to program my mind in such a way as to understand these people, because they don't think like you think and I think. And the average person on that 9-to-5 job, they don't think in any of these terms at all. They think in a completely different vernacular and mindset. Let me try to give you an example. Many of you remember that I said in a previous presentation that I had made that there will not be riots, that they don't anticipate riots or civil unrest in any form in 2015. Now, when an elite makes that statement, I called it riot control. Let me try to explain to you how the elite were thinking when they made that statement. Now, I tried to explain it to you the best I could, but now I'd like to tell you the intricate details, and then I'll give you the minute points of what they're going to do. And let me try to explain how they would think if I said, are there going to be riots? The first thing that an elite would think about is a smart meter. That's right. That would be his first thought. Now, I'm not going to go back and explain smart meters. I did that before. But the first thought, now, what would the first thought that would come into your mind if you said riot control? The first thought would probably not be a smart meter. What would probably, the second thought that an elite would think if I said riot control would be ammunition. Do you know how much ammunition they have had certain agencies of the federal government to purchase? I did say they. I'm sure you heard me correctly. Probably another word that the elite would think, and did, by the way, first thing would come into his mind is executive orders. How are you going to bring about riot control? Well, they already have the executive orders in place. They put them in place a long time ago. Again, first thing an elite would say is riot vehicles. Yeah, they've put them all over America. They're in every major city. You've seen some pictures of them. So whenever an elite would say no riots, no civil commotion, those would be the things that he would think about. Quite contrary, quite different than what the mindset of the average person on the street would be. Let me give you another example. Suppose you use the expression, crash of the dollar in 2015. Did you catch that? Now, what do you think would be the first thing that would come into the mind of an elite who was making that statement? He may not say it. And that's what happened before. They did not say it to me, but when I went back and asked for an answer, they did. So what was the first thing that would come into the mind of my elite friend? The stock market. What would be the second thing that would come into his mind? What's going to happen when the stock market of America and Great Britain and some other countries crash? What's it going to be? The second thought of the elite would be 1 quadrillion of derivatives that are out there floating around that make the banks solvent because they can no longer depend on interest rates. So as a result, the derivative market would be the first thing it would think about. What would be the next thing that the elite would think about? World reserve currency. That's right. When the crash takes place, from that day forward, what will the world reserve currency be? The elite already know. And I'm going to talk to you about that in the course of this and tell you what it is. But that would be the first thing that the elite would think about. What country is already prepared to be the world reserve currency? Again, you remember back, it must have been 4 years ago. I did a DVD while Mr. Ken Fromm was still alive. And one of the things that I said he had said to me one day on the phone when we were talking personally, he said, Chaplain, China is the big one. Now, that has become the greatest statement that I probably ever heard that man make. Now, when the elites say financial collapse of the dollar, of the pound, whatever it may be, what would be one of the first things they would think about? China. China, becoming a very rapidly growing economy. Let me try another word. And you tell me what's the first thing you think about, and then I'll tell you what is the first thing that the elite think about. The word is Ebola. Yes. I mean, it's everywhere, all over the news. It's a major issue. How major it's going to get, I really don't know. But what would be the first thing that the elite would think about if you use the word Ebola? A plague. Something that has been wondered about for a long time what man would ever do if it plagued in the point of becoming worldwide. The first thing that the elite would think about is population control. Another thing they would think about, horrified. Now, when I use the word horrified, what are you thinking? Oh, you're thinking, yeah, I'd be horrified. No. You know what the elite are thinking? They want the whole world horrified. Because if they can get people in such a mental state that they are literally horrified at any outbreak of a plague, not necessarily Ebola, but any plague. Now, maybe this one is just a plan, but if they could get this outbreak to be so prominent that it would cause people to be horrified, what would it cause people to do? It would cause them to say, oh, do anything you'd like. Take any measures necessary in order to bring this under control so that we won't have to suffer it. Then you think about the word people control is what the elite would think about. Now, I need to ask you a very unusual question. I have just done certain things here. I went over certain points, and I did it intentionally. You remember how I started this section? I said for years and years and years and years, I have talked to, lived with, and intentionally programmed my mind to understand the thinking of the elite. And I just did something in this presentation intentionally. Do you realize what I just did? I just told you buzzwords. Did you catch them? Now, this is the way that the elite do it. Believe me, I've had to figure them out for many, many years. Do you realize that I just told you what they're going to do? That's right. This is the way that they tell you things on the news media. This is the way that they will tell you things through Hollywood movies. This is the way that they will tell you things through what they put up on the internet. They might not necessarily say it direct. Look back at what I just said to you. I said to you, riot control. Oh, you said, well, you were trying to explain the thinking of the elite. No, I was telling you what they're going to do. The words crash of the dollar. It's going to. In fact, I've been given the time. And I gave you buzzwords to try to help you think the way the elite think. I just intentionally tried to help you think the way that these people think. And the only way that you and I will ever be able to overcome the New World Order, the only way that we will ever be able to understand what they're telling us in such a manner that we can set certain things in order, is to be able to think like these people think. So I tried my best to help you understand. I just gave you an entire bunch of buzzwords. Now you'll want to go back in this presentation and review that section on the video or the DVD, because then you'll understand that I have already given you part of what this man told me. I'm going to give it in detail, intricate, as I go through this presentation, but I wanted you to try to understand the way they think. It was the year that I was 49 years of age. I happened to be a missionary in the state of Alaska, just an ordinary, everyday aviation missionary. And I heard that there was going to be a special event taking place in Alaska, and I went to the big oil companies, 9 of them, under the auspices of Alaska Pipeline Service Company, and I said, I'd like to be on that pipeline. Well, they gave me Prudhoe Bay and the Northern 7 work camps. I had not the slightest idea that for the next 3 years I was going to live at Prudhoe Bay with the most powerful, the most controlling, the most manipulative, and the wealthiest people on the face of this earth. I literally lived with them for 3 years and made friends amongst some of them, one of which is still alive, retired, an older gentleman. As you remember, one of them passed away about 3 years ago, and he was a marvelous informant of so many things that you've heard over the years. As a result, I had the privilege, by the providence of God, of becoming the chaplain to the elite of the world for a 3-year period. It has taken me 39 years to be able to understand the elite. Therefore, I really don't expect you to do it in an hour or 2 hours, but at least maybe I can help you, because if I don't help you understand it, then you won't understand what they're trying to say to you, and I want you to understand what I'm trying to tell you too, that I was just told. Let's go back for a moment to the Middle East in order to bring up to date right now, because all of this fits into what's happening in 2015, and without it, you won't be able to contemplate it. The Middle East, 60 years ago, were nothing but Arabs, nomads, roaming the deserts, riding camels. I would never have known this if I had not been there that day and sat and talked after a worship service one night that I had held a chapel service for the men at Prudhoe Bay at Arco Base Camp. And afterwards, one of the elite, he attended my service. And afterwards, he sat around and told me something. He said, "Chaplain, prior to coming to the Trans-Alaska Oil Pipeline and being given the responsibility of building the entire east side of this big oil field, America's oil field in northern Alaska," he said, "I had been given the responsibility by Atlantic Richfield of developing the oil field in Dubai." Let me try to explain. Different oil companies, Shell, Exxon, Atlantic Richfield, the other oil companies, big oil companies of that time, they had found oil in the Arab countries. The Arabs had no money to develop those oil fields. They'd been nomadic peoples for years. They were not prestigious in the world as they are today. And those oil companies, literally, each one of them took a different Arab country and went to them, had Mr. Henry Kissinger to do it for them, by the way, went to them and said, we have found oil on your country, and we will develop your oil field. We will spend the money to do it. You don't have the money to do it. They literally divided up the then known Arab world, and each one of those oil companies took a different country and developed the oil fields. And Mr. Fromm was given the job of developing Dubai for Atlantic Richfield. At the same time, Mr. Henry Kissinger, whom all of you recognize the name, I don't need to go into his past. Mr. Kissinger went to each of those countries after they had agreed to this. And by the way, there was only two, I believe, that did not agree. Those two since have been almost destroyed because they wouldn't go along. That's the story within itself. But Mr. Kissinger went to all of the others and he said, now that we're developing your oil fields, you're going to become super rich. And I am requiring or asking you if you will promise to take a certain portion of everything that you make off of the sale of your oil and buy with it T-bills, America's debt, Federal Reserve issues. And the only reason that America today has the way of life, the standard of living, financial-wise, they turned around and bought our debt until we've gotten to the place that we're the greatest debtor nation on the face of the earth. And it was all because of what was done many years ago. And I sat there and listened to the whole story. Now, where are we today? We've come to the point that we, as a nation, are bankrupt. Great Britain's bankrupt. Most of the nations of the world are bankrupt. China has become the big one. Japan is in horrible condition. There is going to be a new world currency. There is going to be a new petrodollar. The American dollar has already served its purpose. And America has served what the elite want them to serve as, and are now ready to bring in the new world order. And the year 2015 is the year that they have planned to do it. So when I ask my elite friend what is going to take place in 2015, I think you are beginning to understand now why the answer that I was given was literally startling. I don't know how to put it. Please. Now, consider who these people are. You think the Arabs are wealthy? The Arabs are a mere drop in the bucket. Saudi Arabia, you think they've got more money than anybody else on the face of the earth? No, quite to the contrary. The elite are the ones that made Saudi Arabia what they are. The elite are the one who made Dubai what it is. and all of the other oil fields out there that the Arabs, nomads roaming the deserts, didn't have the money to be able to produce. The power, please, try to consider the power, almost unbelievable. You and I cannot even imagine the power of this small group of people who exist. Now, I have said many times before in my other DVDs, I'll state it again, it's so vastly important. There positively is a group of people on the face of the earth who control the world. They control the Arabs. They are having trouble right now. And I'll explain that in the course of this. Now, imagine that over these 37 years since I have been in personal contact with some of these people, I have been threatened twice. Yes, they are not to be played with. They are powerful. They can do whatever they want to. If they can take out John F. Kennedy, the President of the United States of America, they would have no trouble with you or me if they didn't like what we were doing. Twice, one time the Secret Service called me. I was in Denver, Colorado. I'll never forget it. I'd been speaking at Beth Eden Baptist Church, and they said, "Will you come down and talk with us?" I said, "I'll be glad to call you back. Give me a phone number. I can't give you an immediate answer." I went to Dr. Earl Madison, who was a pastor of one of the largest churches in Denver, Colorado, where I was speaking at the time, and I said, "Doctor, if you'll go with me, I will go and speak with the Secret Service. I don't know why." He said, "Sure, Chaplain, I'll go." I said, "Otherwise, I'm not going," because I said, "I'm afraid to." Well, they called me in, were very polite, very executive style. And what they said basically was, "Chaplain, either you do what we say, or it might not be very pleasant for you and your family." I was able to do what they said without hurting my ability to be able to tell the truth, and I did. I was threatened a second time. Second time it was by a phone call. And they said, "Chaplain, you do this, this, and this, and this, or we're going to do this, 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 and this." Don't underestimate the power of these people to be able to bring about a financial collapse anytime they want to. To be able to collapse a 1 quadrillion derivative market any morning they want to. They play with the stock market as if it was a toy. Now, let me say politely, but very kindly, I admire you. I thank you so much for the listening audience that you have been over the years. And many of you have received many of my DVDs, and you've heard me try to explain all this in many different facets from many different angles. Please try to understand. You do not want to know what I'm about to tell you. You remember I said at the beginning of this presentation that when I found out from the Prophecy Club and from my website, lindseywilliams.net, that many of you had said, "Please give us details, give us dates, give us intricate ideas of what's going to happen in 2015. Remember I said I didn't want to make that phone call. I didn't want to make that email contact. I did not want to talk with my elite friend. Well, I'm telling you right now, what I was told and what I'm about to say, you don't want to know. But I'm going to tell you anyway. And after it's all over with, then you decide whether you really are glad that you heard it or not. What my elite friends said about 2015, may I say, as politely as I can, you asked for it. I didn't want to make that contact. You will not find the information that you're going to hear on this DVD anywhere else in the world. There's not a single financial newsletter writer that would dare write this. Well, first of all, they don't know it. Because I dare to say that there might be 2 or 3 of the financial newsletters that I read periodically that I gather they have some contact with the elite. because I do. I can pick up the phone anytime I want to and talk to one. But I gather from the guesses that most financial newsletters make that they really don't have a direct contact. Well, this will be the only place that you will find anywhere what you're going to hear. You won't find it on the evening news. You probably won't get it from the internet. There are a lot of guesses out there. Financial newsletters, they couldn't tell you this even if they wanted to because they have something to sell you. You see, I'm not a financial advisor. I don't sell you any assets. I don't get you involved in the stock market. I merely tell you the truth. So, as a result, I have no ulterior motive in what I'm telling you in this DVD presentation. And I guarantee you, it's the only place on the face of the earth that you'll ever find it. Now, the elite are not God. They think they are, but they aren't. These are their plans that you're going to hear in the remainder of this DVD. But whether they're able to carry out these plans in minute detail exactly as they have told me their plans are, you see, there again, they're not God, so they don't always accomplish what they want. They may not get what they want. Now, I'm going to do something unusual in this DVD I've never done before. Well, there are many things unusual in this DVD I've never done before, but especially this one. The most important part of any and every DVD that I make is the message that I always give at the end. A message from the Bible and about salvation and about setting your spiritual house in order. Now, I'm human enough to know that there are many people that when they get to that part of my DVD, they just merely cut it off and say, well, Pastor, I've already heard that before, and after all, I'm really not interested. Well, I'm going to do it a little different way today. First of all, this is not the end of this DVD by any stretch of the imagination. But in the course of presenting this section, which I usually put at the end, I'm going to put it in the middle of this DVD. Now, don't skip it, because in the course of presenting this part of this DVD, which to me is more important than everything else in the DVD, take everything else I have to say today, and this is the most important thing that you'll ever hear from me. Because if that spiritual house is not set in order, none of the rest of it is really going to matter, because you won't make it anyway. So, in the course of giving this part of the DVD, I am actually going to tell some of the things that my elite friend told me that relate to what they know is going to take place. I will do those things in this section, and then I'll go on to the other sections of the DVD in which I tell you details. And in certain instances, I have actually been given, I know one date that I've been given, and there'll probably be a number of dates that I'll give in the course of this. I will list every event and date at the end of this presentation as I have been given them after I have given an explanation in the course of the remainder of this DVD. In 2012, many of you will remember that I did a DVD entitled 2012, The Beginning of the End. At the time, I was told by my elite friend that there was going to be a divine intervention of some type. At the time, it was not, it will happen right now. At the time, they merely said, we are expecting some event to take place. Now, 2015, the elite have made it very plain. They are certain. Now, please catch this word. They are certain, it is definite in their mind that there will be some sort of divine intervention in 2015. The blood moons have indicated this. Now the Bible says that the heavens are for signs and seasons and days and years, and the first thing it says is signs. And they are expecting a sign, and something will take place. In order to explain this, let me go to a gentleman by the name of Kevin. No, I cannot use his last name. I called him and mentioned to him I would say this in this DVD. He is a rather prominent radio and television show host back on the East Coast. Kevin is a very perceptive individual. I would call him intuitive. He's a Christian, very devout Christian. He called on the phone, just to give you an idea of how perceptive this man is. He called me on the phone one day and he said, "Chaplain, why am I supposed to call you?" And I said, "Kevin, I'm not quite sure. What do you mean?" He said, "God told me to call you." He said, "You've been on my mind for days." And he said, "I don't know what to do." He said, "I don't know why I'm supposed to call you." Well, we carried on a conversation for probably 10 to 15 minutes, and finally it hit both of us. He said, "You know, I have changed the format on my television and radio show because of," and I said, "Kevin, that's it. That's the reason you were supposed to call me, because you see, I just said I'm not going to do any more radio shows." Now, this is just how intuitive this man is. I had to tell you that in order to say, recently, Kevin had a vision. In his vision, he said that he was flying in an aircraft, a private aircraft. He wasn't sure whether it was a private jet or a smaller airplane. And the pilot banked the airplane, and as he did, something said to him, "Look down at the ground and see what you see." Kevin looked, and he was amazed. He said, "There's water everywhere." Now, keep in mind, Kevin lives in Connecticut, not too far from the shoreline of the East Coast. And he saw water everywhere. At the same time, this voice said to him, "This is what is going to happen to the entire East Coast of the United States of America in 2015, and he was even given a date at which it would happen. It was in the fall of 2015. Now, I'm not saying that that vision will take place. I'm merely saying, after that, I asked Kevin, I said, "Kevin, I got to go a little further." He said, "Chaplain, numerous of my very intuitive friends have had the identical same vision and have told me about it recently. The East Coast of the United States of America is due for some catastrophic event." Ephraim Rodriguez, he lives in Puerto Rico. He is a prophet of sorts. He has had a vision of a comet which will hit an island or an area close to Puerto Rico. Please, I'm begging you, just for the sake of knowing. You see, the elite have told me, it's written, they wrote it to me in an email, said they are positively expecting some dramatic divine action in 2015. They're so convinced of it that it was lengthy in the section that they talked with me about it. There are a number of people who have had visions of things like this happening. You at least need to be aware, even though don't say it's the final word. Be aware of what it appears that God is saying to certain people. Please go, if you will, and watch. We'll put it up on the screen so that you can get it. It's only 25 minutes long. Ephraim Rodriguez says that the reason this is going to happen and the reason God will do it is in order to call Christians to repentance. Now, there's some very dramatic things that are going to happen to the east coast of America if Ephraim Rodriguez's prophecy takes place. I beg of you to at least take the time for 25 minutes. You'll find it worth your while to at least know and feel what this man has to say. My elite friend said that there will be a divine intervention. I keep repeating this because it is so vitally important. They say it'll happen in 2015. I likewise am very concerned that the same thing very well could take place. I just have the feeling it might. It was suggested to me that I read the book Harbinger. I would highly recommend that you take time. A book called Harbinger. I would ask you a question in light of all of this. Are you ready to meet God? Now, what Kevin said to me after he related to me the vision, he said, Chaplain, before that date, and he said, in fact, in the next few months' time, he said, I'm leaving the east coast of the United States of America. There are many other people that are doing the same thing because they're very concerned that maybe the elite are correct and maybe their intuitions are also correct. Are you ready to meet God? There was a man who did. It's recorded in the book of Isaiah. Isaiah was a prophet. Now, a prophet is a good man. A prophet is a righteous man. But in God's presence, this prophet of old, which you'll find it recorded in the Word of God, in the Bible, in Isaiah chapter 6 and verse 1, it says, In the year King Uzziah died, I saw also the Lord sitting upon the throne, high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. Then, down in verse 5, it tells how this prophet Isaiah felt after he saw God. Now, when events take place in 2015 and God himself personally intervenes in the life of mankind and events begin to take place, more than likely you'll have the same reaction that this prophet did. Because when a person is in the presence of God, even the most righteous, even the most prophetic, even the most clean and good person as this prophet was, listen to what he said. He said, Then said I, Woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For mine eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. The most righteous person on the face of the earth in the presence of God is dirty. God is so righteous. God's word is so true. And if there's ever a time, or has ever been a time, that I feel that the most important part of any DVD that I give is this, is the reason that instead of putting it at the end, I put it right where I have. Now please don't skip it. I beg of you to listen to what God has to say. In Romans chapter 3 and verse 23, the Bible says, For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, being justified freely by his grace through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. Every one of us in the presence of God, were it not for his grace and his mercy and his salvation which his Son purchased for us on the cross, if it were not for that, we could never be righteous. No church can make us righteous. No works that we can ever do can make us righteous. There's only one way that a person can be righteous enough to live in the presence of God, and there's only one way that a person will ever be in a spiritual condition and your household be in a spiritual condition when you set that house in order in light of what you are going to face in 2015. There's only one way that that will ever take place, and that is by the grace of God, as is described in Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9, for by grace are we saved. You see, in our normal state, the way we are born, we can't exist in the presence of God because He's too righteous. Even as the prophet said, I'm undone. For by grace are we saved, through faith. And that not of yourselves is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. I beg of you, listen to this verse in Acts chapter 4 and verse 12. Neither is there salvation in any other, for there is none other name under heaven given amongst men whereby ye must be saved. That word must. There is no other way. I'm sure you remember the verse from when you were a child and probably in Sunday school. For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in Him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Would you right now be willing to believe in God's Son and what He did for you and allow Him to save your soul that you might be ready to meet Him? Would you please be willing right now to just bow your head just for a moment and say this: Our Father, I believe that Jesus Christ died for me on the cross. I believe that His sacrifice was sufficient to pay the debt of my sin. I believe I'm a sinner. And right now, I'd like to trust your Son, Jesus, as my Savior. Amen. Now, everything else is said in this DVD as far as I'm concerned. What I just gave is the most important part, if you could take all the rest of it and sum it up. You see, there's someone else that believed that also. He was one of the founding fathers in America. His name was Patrick Henry. Patrick Henry was a Christian, and I'd like you to listen to his departing words. These are the words that he wrote shortly before his death. Quote, I have disposed of all my property to my family. There is one thing more which I wish I could give them, and that is the Christian religion. If they had that, and I had not given them 1 cent, they would be rich. If they had not that, and I had given them the world, they would be poor. No matter what happens in 2015, without Jesus Christ, you'll be poor. You may keep your wealth, but there are no pockets in shrouds. I trust that you know Christ is your Savior, and if not, that you'll do it now. Look carefully at this picture. What do you see? You see Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. What's it called? It's called BRICS. I'd like you to note a few things about this group of nations. This group met recently, just a matter of days ago, and the International Monetary Fund said they wanted to congratulate the 5 BRICS countries for creating a new reserve fund that intends to challenge the Western dominance in global lender. I hope you're catching this. This happened only days ago. The IMF's managing director, Christine Lagarde, said the lender would like to work with the BRICS in a new fund, which pools together $100 billion in reserves for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. BRICS lenders launched the fund at a joint bank in the same size as to hold steps to press for a bigger say in the global financial order. Are you catching these buzzwords? Counted on the IMF and the World Bank. Now, let's go first of all to China. China is the holder of the world's largest foreign exchange reserve. China will contribute a book reserve pool of $41 billion to this Brazil-India consortium. And Brazil, India, and Russia will chip in $18 billion, and South Africa will chip in $5 billion. Now, look back at that picture again. What do you not see? Yes, the greatest nation on the face of the earth is not there. The reserve currency of the world is not there. The petrodollar is never mentioned in this. In fact, they have made it intentionally plain that they have no intention whatsoever in allowing the American dollar any longer to dominate this fund. What do you not see in this picture? You do not see the United States of America anywhere. Why? By 2015, the American dollar will cease to be the reserve currency of the world and will also cease to be the petrodollar of the world. Preparations are already being made for what they will do. Listen to this. 5 countries that together represent 43% of the world's population, 43%, and 18% of the world's GDP, which stands for gross domestic product, of these countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Where is America? It's not there. Plans are already made for America by the IMF, the World Bank, and other groups that I'll talk about as we go along today. The next word, Phnom Penh. Oh, you remember it. The announcement at this summit meeting in Phnom Penh said that 15 Asian nations comprising 1/2. Now, how many nations, what was the percentage of this other group over here? You're right, 43%. Now, when Phnom Penh took place, 15 Asian nations comprising 1/2 of the world's population, they met and formed the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Who was excluded from this partnership? The United States of America. Our president was there, but they snubbed their nose at him and said, "We're not going to allow you to be a part." He came home, and it was never reported in the American media what happened at that meeting. What am I trying to work up to? I hope you're beginning to get this. You and I, more than likely, the majority of people watching this DVD live in the United States of America. You and I are going to face the most phenomenal events in 2015 that has ever happened in your life, my life, the life of our parents, or our relatives. You will face it in 2015. I wish I could leave this one off, but I can't. Most people have never heard of Jamie Caruso, even though he is the head of an immensely powerful organization. He has been serving as the general manager of the Bank of International Settlement since 2009 and will continue in that role until 2017. The Bank of International Settlements is a rather boring name, but very few people realize that it is the very source of global financial system. So when Jamie Caruso speaks, people should listen. Listen to what he had to say. And the fact that he recently warned that the global financial system is currently, here are his exact words, more fragile in many ways than it was just prior to the collapse of Lehman Brothers that set off all sorts of alarm bells. Yes, we're in the midst of one of the most alarming times that has ever been on the face of this earth. Now, I'm going to give you the date. May I state again before I do this, the elite are human beings. They think they're God, but they aren't. They don't always get their way. And my elite friend gave me, which caused, now you remember why it happened. You called and asked the Prophecy Club for me to go to my elite friends and get details. And you wanted dates. Well, when he gave them to me, I was stunned. And I'm going to give you one at this point that I hope will shadow you also. The date the elite, if they have their way, will bring about a financial collapse will be in September and October of 2015. 2008, take that year, which was the last major financial crisis in the world, and multiply it over and over and over and over and over and over again, and you'll have what's going to happen in 2015. David Stockman. You remember I said one day that my elite friend had said to me, I want you to go to a certain place and you'll have a definition of what the next major financial crisis is going to be. I did. I went on the web and I found the words of David Stockman. And this is what he said. He said, when it burst, there will be no new round of bailouts like it was for the banks in 2008. Did you catch that? 2008 over and over and over and over again. He said, there'll be no bailouts like this again. Are you ready for the definition of what's going to happen in 2015 if the elite have their way? You did hear me say, if the elite have their way. And it looks at this point they will, barring something major. Here is David Stockman's definition. He says, America will descend into an era of zero-sum austerity and violent political conflict, extinguishing even today's feeble remnants of economic growth. I'd like you to hear it from one of the most wealthy men on the face of the earth. His name is Hugo Salinas Price. He's a Mexican billionaire. Understand, he owns the communication system of Mexico. And Mr. Price said, I think we're going to see a series of bankruptcies. I think the rise in interest rates will be the fatal sign which is going to ignite the derivative crisis. This is going to bring down the derivative system of $1 quadrillion. Did you catch that? The derivative system today is estimated to be $1 quadrillion. No controls whatsoever. Every bank in the world is involved in it. Since interest rates are so low, banks can't make it any longer on interest. There's only one thing they can do. Go to the Las Vegas one-armed bandit of the financial world called the derivative market, and every lending institution in the world is playing it now because interest rates are so low. Hugo Salinas Price said, most derivatives are related to interest rates. The spiking of interest rates in the United States may set it off. What is going to happen in the world is eventually they're going to come to a moment where there's going to be a massive bankruptcies around the globe. What is going to be left after the dust settles is, please catch this word, I didn't say it. One of the richest men on the face of the earth said it. What is going to be left after the dust settles is gold. Some people are going to have it, and some people are not. Then the problem is going to be how to hold on to it, what you've got, because it's going to be a very unpleasant world. How's it going to happen? Well, it'll happen when there's some things taking place with the banks. And I need to remind you again the process of the derivative market. Derivatives are very complicated bank instruments, legal instruments, or financial instruments. The derivative market will be brought down by, number one, currency wars, By number 2, the trade wars. And then number 3, the final nail that will be driven into the coffin of the derivative market will be when interest rates begin to go up. The moment you hear of interest rates beginning to rise, it's all over. It's finished. Be ready. You'll probably hear some words about it before, but hopefully you do, and you know how to discern it. Let me read you an article from Bloomberg, and I'm quite sure you've watched the news lately as to what's happening with Russia. U.S. and European Union sanctions against Russia threaten to hasten the move away from the dollar that's been striving since the global financial crisis. One place the shift has become evident. Now please catch these words, and I hope you'll write them down. The American dollar is losing. The American dollar has had it. The American dollar is dying. All over the world, they're cashing it in. One place that the shift has become evident is in Hong Kong, where the dollar selling has led to the central banks to buy more than $9.5 billion since June the 1st to prevent its currency from rallying as the sanctions stroked flux Russian cash. OAO, Russia's second largest wireless operator, shifted some cash holdings away from its dollar account. Trading of the Chinese yen versus the Russian ruble rose to the highest on July the 31st since the end of 2010. We have hastened the collapse of the dollar by the decisions that have been made in Washington, and the Russian crisis will grow stronger and stronger, mark my words. Again, a Moscow-based company, it's called Megafon, has been targeted by sanctions. It's moving its funds into Hong Kong dollars. Chief Financial Officer Greg something, I can't pronounce his name, is in a phone interview last said, billions have been transferred away from the U.S. dollar and into the euro. Again, listen to this one. A company that is a producer of nickel and palladium, one of the very much needed metals in our world today, is keeping some of its cash in Asian currency. They've moved away from the American dollar. Two people knowledgeable of this said that they identified this move out of the American dollar. Now, when BRICS, 40% of the world's population, when Phnom Penh, the large block of population over there, when China and Russia and the countries that are so disgusted with our Federal Reserve System, when they say we no longer will use, and this has already been said, we no longer will use the American dollar, what happens to the dollar? Now, you figure it out for yourself. When it's no longer needed, you have something in your house you don't need, where do you put it? You put it in the garbage can. What's going to happen to the American dollar when the world doesn't need it? It's going to become nothing but the worthless piece of paper which the Federal Reserve has made it. Listen what's happening in Russia. Rich Russians are looking to move funds to banks in Hong Kong, Singapore, and Dubai. Chief executive of Moscow-based group said that they have moved $400 million on behalf of rich Russians just within the past few days out of the American dollar and into these other currencies. China is making a push for greater use of its currency in international trade. The People's Bank of China extended a yuan swap list to Switzerland in July. After agreeing to facilitate with the European Central Bank last year, the nation also agreed to allow companies to clear transactions in London and Frankfurt for the first time and no longer in New York. Folks, all of this has happened in preparation for 2015. This is not being done by chance. This is being done by design for preparation of what will take place in 2015, and I hope you're catching it. How will it happen? I've told you the dates that the elite say it will happen if they have their way. Now, please make preparation apply to those dates. I hope that you'll set everything in order. Most important part, set your spiritual house in order. Do that before you do your dollar house in order. And then set your financial house in order. 2015 is going to be catastrophic. How will it happen? First of all, you're going to see a major drop in the stock market. Secondly, the stock market will precipitate a collapse of the derivative market. When the $1 quadrillion that's in the derivative market collapses, the banks, you heard me, the banks will be in grave trouble because the banks no longer can depend on interest to keep them going. They now have to depend on the derivative market, which is a gambling den for the banks and the super wealthy of the world. When the derivatives go, the majority of the banking institutions go with them. And I've told that they want 10 banking establishments only in America. This is their goal. All the rest of them, they want them closed. And everybody under their auspices. At the same time, your IRA, your 401k, and your pension fund will become worthless at the time of the collapse. Please make preparations. You cannot trust somebody else to handle your finances for you. What will happen at that time? Gold will skyrocket. You heard what Hugo Salinas Price said. I agree with him. I've heard that same thing from other of my elite friends. The one thing that has stood for thousands of years, it's the only thing that'll stand when that happens. People will beg at that point. No, you're not going to have riots. I've tried to tell you this in the course of this DVD, that my elite friend said, you are not going to see riots in America. In my previous DVD, I told you how they are dumbing people down in order to make them so that they won't riot. Instead, when these institutions fail, and what they want to do in 2015 when it happens, you're going to see riots in America. Instead, you're going to see people, mark my words, you're going to see people beg and plead, please get us out of this mess. My children are going hungry. I've got to have food in the house. I can't put gasoline in the tank of my automobile to get to work. Please step in and help us. That's not a riot. That's a begging for the New World Order. And that's exactly what you're going to see happen. I'd like you to hear a man that put it so well. He was asked the question, what is the biggest threat to the United States of America?
May I begin with you, Mr. Prager. If you had to identify a single threat to the future of our country, above all the others, what would it be? And then others comment as well when the time comes.
No, it's not Obama. It's not. If God forbid President Obama came down with an illness, nothing would change. Nothing. I believe the greatest threat facing America, I believe this my entire adult life, is that we have not passed on what it means to be American to this generation. You cannot, let me make this is not a sweet line. This is meant literally. A society does not survive if it does not have a reason to survive. That's true for individuals. Where there is a why, there is a how. I hate to tell you who said it, Nietzsche, but nevertheless, it remains true. We have lost the why. The greatest generation did not teach my generation what Americanism is. It's not its fault. It wasn't taught. This goes back 100 years to John Dewey, to the importation of European professors to our universities, to a whole host of issues. The average American who deeply loves this country and even has conservative values cannot articulate what those values are. It is no one's fault, but that is the greatest threat. When we understand this American trinity, in God we trust, liberty, e pluribus unum, that is uniquely American, it is not European. The French preferred fraternité and liberté and égalité, equality. We don't, as I explained in my talk. We believe in equality of birth, but not equality of result. When it is understood what America stands for, when it is understood that there is a moral dimension to a smaller government, it is not an economic question, it is a moral question. We give far more charity per capita than Europeans do. Why? Are we born better? No. The bigger the government, the worse the citizen. They are preoccupied in Europe with how much time off. Where will they vacation? When will they retire? These are selfish questions. These are not altruistic questions. So the goodness that America created is jeopardized by our not knowing what we stand for. That's our greatest threat. We are our problem.
Yes, sir.
I just want to add a word here. There will always be a sliver of Americans like Governor Palin's son who will enlist and know in their gut, because of their home life or because they're just special, that they know that we have to defend freedom. But the very fact that the United States of America is about to confirm to the U.S. Supreme Court a woman who banned the military from her campus gives you an idea of how deep this problem is. That is not disqualifying to Democrats. To Democrats, that is not disqualifying is a moment of darkness in American history. Obviously, I'm completely in agreement with the governor and my colleague. I would just add that I have never said this, so I have good credentials to say this now, because it's common for commentators to say every election, this is the most important election in American history or in our time. I never said that except with regard to with regard to Bush 2, term 2, because if we had fled Iraq, the consequences in the world for the ascendance of evil were too frightening to imagine. So I've only said this once before, and it was a presidential election. This is not a presidential election and is the most important in modern American history this November. This November is a referendum on what we want America to be. It is nothing short of that. And there is one party that stands for America's values, and it has nothing to do with patriotism, and I'm not attacking patriotic fervor or love of America. It has nothing to do with that. You can love America and be an awful American. You could love your children and be an awful parent. Okay? These things have to be spelled out to the left because they like to distort everything that we say. So the issue is not, are you a wonderful, wonderful person or love America? The issue is you have different values than America was founded on. And this is a referendum this November. That is why you must work your tails off as we are working our tails off. If we do not change both houses, we lose. That is how important it is.
Let me close this portion of our program by calling on each of our speakers in the same order as they were introduced to begin. Beginning with Dennis Prager. Dennis.
Okay. Folks, Abraham Lincoln said that the United States is the last best hope for Earth. That's the way he put it. Or we often say for mankind. It will not be the last best hope for mankind if it becomes like Western Europe. Nobody has ever said Norway is the last best hope for mankind. Is that fair to say? And I know I'll be attacked as anti-Norwegian because anything that we say is race-based. So with the risk of being considered anti-Scandinavian in my essence, may I say that nobody says Sweden, Norway, or Denmark is the last best hope of mankind, nor have they said that since 1603 about France. And so it has only been said about the United States. This is the force for good on this earth. It is not peace activists that liberated Auschwitz. It is military people who liberated Auschwitz. The left has everything wrong. And that is what this battle is about, and it's a heroic battle, but we have to win. We have to do it based on the knowledge of what we are and what we have to retain, this being the last best hope for mankind. Do we want to be? The left does not want to be. The president was asked, do you believe in American exceptionalism? You know what his answer was? I'm sure many of you know it. He said, I believe in American exceptionalism the way a Brit believes in British exceptionalism, and the way in which a Greek believes in Greek exceptionalism. But Greeks don't believe in Greek exceptionalism. They don't. Except an exceptional ability to get Germany to bail them out of their problems. That's exceptional, I must admit. But no, do you realize what that answer means? It means we are not exceptional. That's what this battle is about. Is this a human experiment, or isn't it? And finally, do we trust the United States to increase good on earth, or the United Nations to increase good on earth? The left believes that the UN is a greater force for good than the United States. The United Nations just elected Iran to the Commission on the Status of Women. Do you know, this was the first time in 28 years of broadcasting I could not think of an absurd analogy, because you can't out-absurd what happened at the UN. To elect Iran, I can only imagine, maybe the only thing I could imagine the Iranian delegate to the UN Commission on the Status of Women speaking about is a new color of veil that Iran will be inaugurating, and that will be an upgrade in the status of Iranian women. We are not only allowing black veils, but gray and blue as well. I mean, this is a country that tortures women who run away from their homes because they don't want to marry the man that their parents set them up with at the age of 11. And they are on the status of the Commission on Women. Who is the greater good on earth, the U.S. or the UN? I hope this invigorates you for the greatest fight in our history. Thank you.
Next, would you please consider with me an item that you will be affected by, I'm going to be affected by, everybody will. It already has affected us, the housing market. I'm quite sure you didn't expect me to bring up this subject in this DVD, but it was brought up to me. Therefore, I need to tell you that something is scheduled for the housing market. Now remember that the housing market bubble collapsed a few years ago. And when it did, it put our economy into the condition that's into today, and the entire world's economy was drastically affected by what happened in that housing market. Well, I'd like you to hear what some people have to say about the housing market. The resurgence of U.S. housing market may not. Now, before I finish reading this, let me say, I'm merely taking other sources and verifying what my elite friends have already said. They told me these things, and then I've gone to other sources to show you that there are some other people out there also who are saying, we think this is going to happen also. It all began, though, by me being told it, as I stated in the first part of this video. Okay, here we go. The resurgent U.S. housing market may not be as robust as is advertised. Here is the problem. Too many all-cash buyers and not enough mortgage finance buyers. Let me try to explain. While it's true that home prices have bounced from their 2010 lows and that sales volume have picked up somewhat, the structure of this rebound is not ideal. The traditional core buyers are missing in the action. These core buyers are young couples, young families who, through a mortgage, purchased a home. Either they can't get a mortgage or they don't want one. Whatever is the case, mortgage originals continuing to languish near 17-year low, even though mortgage rates are near the lowest in generations. Instead of mortgage finance buyers, all cash buyers have stepped in and become the huge percent in the housing market. But the housing market cannot live on all cash buyers alone. It needs mortgage finance buyers for obvious reasons, the first of which is simple math. The number of potential mortgage finance buyers is vastly greater than the number of potential all-cash buyers. Unfortunately, mortgage finance buyers show no signs of returning to their traditional home buying ways. Instead, they are renting or living with their parents. What's happening to the young people of today? They can't buy that home. What's going to happen to the housing market in 2015? You'll have another collapse as you did in 2010. I hope you're prepared for it. And those of you who are in the business, please take notice. Next item that I was warned about, and please take this to heart. The Muslim world. Today in the Muslim world, there's nothing but problems. Those problems are there for a reason. The Muslim world will be used. I'm having to look out some of my notes here because there are many of these expressions that were used to me that I have to relate to you the best I can as they did. The problems in the Muslim world today will be used to foment discord and war in 2015. I need you to see a DVD. There was a young lady in a certain meeting that asked a question. She was a Muslim lady, and she was honest. She wasn't being critical. She was asking an honest question. I'm quite sure after the panel answered her question, she wished she had never asked it.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace to you all. My name is Saba Ahmed. I'm a law student at American University. I am here to ask you a simple question. I know that we portray Islam and all Muslims as bad, but there is 1.8 billion Muslim followers of Islam. We have 8 million plus Muslim Americans in this country, and I don't see them represented here. But my question is, how can we fight an ideological war with weapons? How can we ever end this war? The jihadist ideology that you talk about, it's an ideology. How can you ever win this thing if you don't address it ideologically?
Great question. I am so glad you're here, and I am so glad you brought that up because it gives us an opportunity to answer. What I find so amazing is since the beginning of this panel, which we are here about Benghazi attack against our people, not one person mentioned Muslims. We are here against Islam, or we're launching war against Muslims. We are here to discuss how 4 Americans died and what our government is doing. We were not here to bash Muslims. You were the one who brought up the issue about most Muslims, not us. And since you brought it up, allow me to elaborate with my answer. There are 1.2 billion Muslims in the world today. Of course, not all of them are radicals. The majority of them are peaceful people. The radicals are estimated to be between 15 to 25%, according to all intelligence services around the world. That leaves 75% of them peaceful people. But when you look at 15 to 25% of the world Muslim population, you're looking at 180 million to 300 million people dedicated to the destruction of Western civilization. That is as big of the United States. So why should we worry about the radicals, 15 to 25%? Because it is the radicals that kill. Because it is the radicals that behead and massacre. When you look throughout history, when you look at all the lessons of history, most Germans were peaceful. Yet the Nazis drove the agenda. And as a result, 60 million people died. Almost 14 million in concentration camps. 6 million were Jews. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. When you look at Russia, most Russians were peaceful as well. Yet the Russians were able to kill 20 million people. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. When you look at China, for example, most Chinese were peaceful as well. Yet the Chinese were able to kill 70 million people. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. When you look at Japan prior to World War II, most Japanese were peaceful as well. Yet Japan was able to butcher its way across Southeast Asia, killing 12 million people, mostly killed with bayonets and shovels. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. On September 11th in the United States, we had 2.3 million Arab Muslims living in the United States. It took 19 hijackers, 19 radicals to bring America down to its knees, destroy the World Trade Center, attack the Pentagon, and kill almost 3,000 Americans that day. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. So for all our powers of reasons and us talking about moderate and peaceful Muslims, I'm glad you're here. But where are the others speaking out? And since you are the only Muslim representative, save the applause till the end. Thank you. Thank you. And since you're the only Muslim representative in here, you took the limelight instead of speaking about why our government, and I assume, are you an American? You're an American citizen. So as an American citizen, you sat in this room and instead of standing up and saying a question or asking something about our 4 Americans that died and what our government is doing to correct the problem, you stood there to make a point about peaceful, moderate Muslims. I wish you brought 10 with you to question about how we can hold our government responsible. It is time we take political correctness and throw it in the garbage where it belongs and start calling it
Great Britain. Great Britain has come up in all of this. Great Britain is in big trouble, both financially and also because of the Muslim world. America and Great Britain, I understand Great Britain is actually equal with America in problems in the financial world. America has more debt than all the rest of the world combined. You've heard me say this before. Great Britain comes very close behind of America in their problems. Great Britain has a massive Muslim community. And I'd like you to see some of the Muslim protest pictures that have taken place in London. Now, this is rather unique in that a gentleman who travels to London on a regular basis in a business capacity said that over all the years he had gone to London, he had never seen what he has seen in the past year. And he brought back these pictures with him. You need to see what Great Britain is facing today in relation to the Muslim world. Naturally, America does not have as large a Muslim population as Great Britain, but keep in mind, it will only foment trouble. So here are the pictures from Great Britain of the Muslim world. There's going to be great turmoil in Washington, D.C. This turmoil is not going to be pretty. The best way that I can describe it is in Congress, there's going to be such conflict, and it'll be created intentionally. This isn't done by chance. They want massive conflict and dissension in order to cause fear in the hearts of the American people. Fear, as you know, shuts down the brain. You can't think properly when you're afraid. There's going to be great conflict in Washington, D.C., in the Congress, Senate, House of Representatives, in the presidency, and even in the president's own cabinet. You're going to see massive dissension. It will grow very much in already. And by the time 2015 comes around, you're going to see massive fights. I put it this way. I think it'll come so close it'll be near fist fights in Congress. Mark my words. I need you to see what one person had to say that I think they put it quite well. Realizing that all of this is being done by design.
How's this for apocalyptic literature? We were told it was written by a pastor's wife in biblical prose as a commentary of current events. It is brilliant. And it came to pass in the age of insanity that the people of the land called America, having lost their morals, their initiative, and their will to defend their liberties, chose as their supreme leader that person known as the One. He emerged from the vapors with a message that had no meaning, but he hypnotized the people, telling them, "I am sent to save you." My lack of experience, my questionable ethics, my monstrous ego, and my association with evildoers are of no consequence. I shall save you with hope and change. Go, therefore, and proclaim throughout the land that he who preceded me is evil, that he has defiled the nation, and that all he has built must be destroyed. And the people rejoiced, for even though they knew not what the One would do, he had promised that it was good, and they believed. And the One said, "We live in the greatest country in the world. Help me change everything about it." And the people said, "Hallelujah! Change is good." Then he said, "We are going to tax the rich fat cats." And the people said, "Sock it to 'em," and redistribute their wealth. And the people said, "Show us the money." And then he said, "Redistribution of wealth is good for everybody." And Joe the plumber asked, "Are you kidding me? You're going to steal my money and give it to the deadbeats?" And the One ridiculed and taunted him, and Joe's personal records were hacked and publicized. One lone reporter asked, "Isn't that Marxist policy?" And she was banished from the kingdom. Then a citizen asked, "With no foreign relations experience and having zero military experience or knowledge, how will you deal with radical terrorists?" And the One said, "Simple. I shall sit with them and talk with them and show them how nice we really are, and they will forget that they ever wanted to kill us all." And the people said, "Hallelujah! We're safe at last, and we can beat our weapons into free cars for the people." Then the One said, "I shall give 95% of you lower taxes." And one lone voice said, "But 40% of us don't pay any taxes." So the One said, "Then I shall give you some of the taxes the fat cats pay." And the people said, "Hallelujah! Show us the money." Then the One said, "I shall tax your capital gains when you sell your homes." And the people yawned, and the slumping housing market collapsed. And he said, "I shall mandate employer-funded health care for every worker and raise the minimum wage. And I shall give every person unlimited health care and medicine and transportation to the clinics. Oh, except for Muslims shall not pay their share of health care." And the people said, "Give me some of that." Then he said, "I shall penalize employers who ship jobs overseas." And the people said, "Where's my rebate check?" Then the One said, "I shall bankrupt the coal industry and electricity rates will skyrocket." And the people said, "Coal is dirty. Coal is evil. No more coal." But we don't care for that part about higher electric rates. So the One said, "Not to worry. If your rebate isn't enough to cover your expenses, we'll bail you out. Just sign up with the Acorn and your troubles are over." Then he said, "Illegal immigrants feel scorned and slighted. Let's grant them amnesty, Social Security, free education, free lunches, free medical care, bilingual signs, and guaranteed housing." And the people said, "Hallelujah!" And they made him king. And so it came to pass that employers facing spiraling costs and ever higher taxes raised their prices and laid off workers. Others simply gave up and went out of business, and the economy sank like unto a rock dropped from a cliff. The banking industry was destroyed, manufacturing slowed to a crawl, and more of the people were without means of support. Then the One said, "I am the One, the Messiah, and I'm here to save you. We shall just print more money so everyone will have enough." But our foreign trading partners said unto him, "Wait a minute, your dollar's not worth a pile of camel dung. You will have to pay more." And the One said, "Wait a minute, that's unfair." And the world said, "Neither are these other idiotic programs you've embraced. Lo, you've become a socialist state and a second-rate power. Now you shall play by our rules." And the people cried out, "Alas, alas, what have we done?" But yea, verily, it was too late. The people set upon the One snapped out of their malaise and rented their clothing. But alas, it was too late. And the change agent's name was changed to dung, and the once mighty nation was no more. And the once proud people were without sustenance or shelter or hope. And the change the One had given them was as like unto a poison that had destroyed them, and like a whirlwind that consumed all they had built. And the people beat their chests in despair and cried out in anguish, "Give us back our nation, our pride, our hope." But it was too late, and their homeland was no more. You may think this is a fairy tale, but it's not. It's happening right now. And before you go into the bathroom to throw up, forward this video to your friends and those you know who care about our country, and what is happening to it under the rule of Commissar Abomination. Yeah, this is too true to be funny. Tragic, but not funny. Tragic, but true. This is the end of this video, but it doesn't have to be the end of our nation if enough people wake up and wake up others. Will you please help save our nation by...
You're going to see near fist fights in Congress. You're going to see the Republicans and the Democrats fighting amongst themselves. It is going to create what they want to create: instability, unrest, and uncertainty. Getting people ready in order to accept the New World Order. Keep in mind that in order for the New World Order to be brought in, there's got to be an atmosphere created by the elite in order to bring it to that point. However you want to describe all this, whatever you think the outcome may be, whether as a Christian you believe this could possibly usher in the tribulation, I'm not saying it will, but at some point this New World Order seems to be accelerating and getting itself ready for something. Now this instability, this unrest, and this uncertainty will create fear in the minds of the American people as they begin to see the American dollar collapse because of nations around the world not using it, which I've already explained to you. And every bit of this will bring on a situation in Washington, D.C., which the United States of America has never seen before. We've always had a fairly peaceful situation in Washington. You will see this unrest escalate rapidly in 2015. So listen, if you will, to what a congressman has to say.
My name is Elbert Lee Guillory, and I'm the senator for the 24th District right here in beautiful Louisiana. Recently, I made what many are referring to as a bold decision to switch my party affiliation to the Republican Party. I wanted to take a moment to explain why I chose to become a Republican, and also to explain why I don't think it was a bold decision at all. It is the right decision, not only for me, but for all my brothers and sisters in the black community. You see, in recent history, the Democrat Party has created the illusion that their agenda and their policies are what's best for black people. Somehow it's been forgotten that the Republican Party was founded in 1854 as an abolitionist movement with one simple creed, that slavery is a violation of the rights of man. Frederick Douglass called Republicans the party of freedom and progress, and the first Republican president was Abraham Lincoln, the author of the Emancipation Proclamation. It was Republicans in Congress who authored the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, giving former slaves citizenship, voting rights, and due process of law. The Democrats, on the other hand, were the party of Jim Crow. It was Democrats who defended the rights of slave owners. It was the Republican President Dwight Eisenhower who championed the Civil Rights Act of 1957. But it was the Democrats in the Senate who filibustered the bill. You see, at the heart of liberalism is the idea that only a great and powerful big government can be the benefactor of social justice for all Americans. But the left is only concerned with one thing: control. And they disguise this control as charity. Programs such as welfare, food stamps, these programs aren't designed to lift black Americans out of poverty. They were always intended as a mechanism for politicians to control the black community. The idea that blacks, or anyone for that matter, need the government to get ahead in life is despicable. And even more important, this idea is a failure. Our communities are just as poor as they have always been. Our schools continue to fail children. Our prisons are filled with young black men who should be at home, being fathers. Our self-initiative and our self-reliance have been sacrificed in exchange for allegiance to our overseers, who control us by making us dependent on them. Sometimes I wonder if the word freedom is tossed around so frequently in our society that it has become a cliche. The idea of freedom is complex and it's all-encompassing. It's the idea that the economy must remain free of government persuasion. It's the idea that the press must operate without government intrusion. And it's the idea that the emails and phone records of Americans should remain free from government search and seizure. It's the idea that parents must be the decision makers in regards to their children's education, not some government bureaucrat. But most importantly, it is the idea that the individual must be free to pursue his or her own happiness, free from government dependence and free from government control. Because to be truly free is to be reliant on no one other than the author of our destiny. These are the ideas at the core of the Republican Party, and it is why I am a Republican. So my brothers and sisters of the American community, please join with me today in abandoning the government plantation and the party of disappointment, so that we may all echo the words of one Republican leader who famously said, "Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last."
Then you must consider the failure of the healthcare system. I don't think there's any doubt in your mind. Nancy Pelosi said, let's just go ahead and sign it and get it in place, and then we'll decide what's in it. Well, we're finding out what's in it. And it's not pleasant at all. There is going to be, intentionally, by design, there is going to be failure of the healthcare system. Our wonderful way of putting everything under government isn't working and won't. Please, I beg of you, I've asked you before. I'm going to ask you one more time, and I probably won't say it again because it'll be too late by the time I get more information and can give it to you. You must, positively, you must call BioCare Hospital in Tijuana, Mexico, and request their free 60-page booklet. You will need it. You may not think so right now. You will need it in 2015. Now we're going to put the phone number on the screen. It's 800-262-0212, and please ask for Teresa. And mention to her that you want the 60-page booklet again, 800-262-0212. You will need it. I would like to give you now what will not happen in 2015. I've said things that I have been told will happen. I would like now to give you what will not be taking place in 2015. First of all, there will be no riots. If the elite have their way, they will bring in the new world order peaceably. There will not be riots in 2015. They have dumbed people down, and I have said in my previous DVD series how they've done it. I hope you've believed it and taken it to heart. More things are being done to cause this. Again, there will not be, and please, those of you who have said there will be, please don't disagree with me. You're getting yours from a guess. I'm getting mine from them. And they know they can't do this. In 2015, there will not be gun control. I hope you're catching this. And please, many of the talk show hosts that have said there will be, please just bear with me for a while and watch and see whether it happens or not. So in 2015, there will not be riots, and there will not be gun control. Well, are you ready? I'd like to sum it all up. So far, now take them down, everything that I was told will and will not happen, I've given it to you in detail. Now I'm going to say it, sentence by sentence. So far, there will be divine action in 2015. No question. The elite are sure it's going to happen. I feel it will happen. Others, prophets, have prophesied of it. Again, so far, September and October of 2015, if the elite have their way, there will be a financial collapse. I did not say a Great Depression. I said a financial collapse. Take 2008 and multiply it over and over and over and over and over. Again, in 2015, there will be massive corporate bankruptcies. If you have invested in a corporation, be extremely careful. The best of corporations will declare bankruptcy in 2015. 2015 will see a stock market crash. How far it will go, I do not know. But it'll go far enough that your IRAs, your 401ks, and your pension funds are going to suffer drastically. In 2015, there will be derivative market failure. In 2015, there will be many bank failures. We've had that already. Banks have been failing on a weekly basis for the past 3 or 4 or 5 years. You'll see this accelerate in 2015. 2015, the housing market will collapse again, as it did a few years ago. In 2015, gold prices will skyrocket. People, you remember that I was told many years ago by my elite friend, I've given it in other DVDs, that there positively will be a time that the only thing that will survive is the elite's currency. They've depended on it for all these years. They don't trust paper. And if you're into paper, if you have a mortgage, if you cannot pay that mortgage, they will repossess. Get out of debt at any price. Get rid of your paper. Get into tangibles. As you see these things beginning to happen, gold will skyrocket up. Again, in 2015, our president will do nothing. I know this sounds startling. And it was startling to me too when I was given it. He's not going to do anything but play golf. He has no intentions anymore of doing anything except just enjoying the time he has left. Again, in 2015, there'll be no riots. They already have dumbed people down to the point they think they can bring in the New World Order without civil commotion. And in 2015, there will not be gun confiscation. Well, you asked for it. I contacted my elite friend. This is the result, and I feel obligated. I've just given it to you, every point. You can never say again I didn't give details. There's one man that I've had a great admiration for in my life. He's my hero. I guess it's because he was the greatest orator, along with Ronald Reagan, that I've ever known in my life. Paul Harvey summed it up the best that I've ever heard it summed up when he gave it in this following, and I'll let this be the closing on this DVD because I don't think there's any more I can say. I hope you'll take it to heart. Every time my elite friends give me an information, I promise you I will bring it to you. Please go to lindseywilliams.net on a regular basis, because every time I'm given something, we will post it there. Set your spiritual house in order. And I wish you the best. Don't lose sleep at night. Don't worry. That doesn't do any good at all. Let the Lord handle your life, and you'll find that you will be able to enjoy all of the things that happen on the face of the earth to the end that you'll survive, and you can live a peaceful life through it all.
Americans, the how and the why of our beloved republic are so much better known and understood than the who. The United States of America was born in 1776, but it was conceived 169 years before that. The earliest settlers had watered the New World with much sweat. They had built substantial holdings for themselves, for their families, and when the time came to separate themselves from a tyranny an ocean away, at best it meant starting all over again after the ravages of war. Researching what you're about to hear gave a whole new dimension to my reverence for our nation's first citizens. All others of the world's revolutions, before and since, were initiated by men who had nothing to lose. Nothing to lose. Our founders had everything to lose and nothing to gain, except one thing. Hello, Americans. I'm Paul Harvey. You remember the cherry tree fiction. A long time after you have forgotten the more earth-shaking history-making episodes in the life of George Washington. You have misplaced in your memory the details of Ben Franklin's statesmanship, but you remember his flying a kite. Joyce Kilmer was a great military hero, but the only thing you personally recall about him is his poetic tribute to trees. Maybe of this current decade, that which will be remembered best will not be its wars and its moon rockets or its crumbling frontiers or the giants who lived and died. Maybe all that'll survive to linger in the day-by-day vocabulary of generations yet unborn may be the songs of a Memphis minstrel or the reincarnation of electric automobiles. But for any eve of the 4th of July, I, Paul Harvey, do herewith bequeath unto you something to remember. You may not be able to quote one line from the Declaration of Independence at this moment. Henceforth, you'll always be able to quote at least one line. It's in the last paragraph where you will recall when I remind you. It says, "We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." In the Pennsylvania State House that's now called Independence Hall in Philadelphia, the best men from each of the colonies sat down together. This was a very fortunate hour in our nation's history, one of those rare occasions in the lives of men when we had greatness to spare. These were men of means, well-educated. 24 were lawyers and jurists. 9 were farmers, owners of large plantations. On June 11, a committee sat down to draw up a Declaration of Independence. We were going to tell the British fatherland, no more rule by redcoats. Below the dam of ruthless foreign rule, the stream of freedom was running shallow and muddy, and we were going to light a fuse to dynamite that dam. This pact, as Burke later put it, was a partnership between the living and the dead and the yet unborn. There was no bigotry, there was no demagoguery in this group. All had shared hardships. Jefferson finished a draft of the document in 17 days. Congress adopted it in July, and so much is familiar history. But now, King George III had denounced all rebels in America as traitors. Punishment for treason was hanging. The names now so familiar to you from the several signatures on that Declaration of Independence, the names were kept secret for 6 months, for each knew the full meaning of that magnificent last paragraph in which his signature pledged his life, his fortune, and his sacred honor. 56 men placed their names beneath that pledge. 56 men knew when they signed that they were risking everything. They knew if they won this fight, the best they could expect would be years of hardship in a struggling nation. And if they lost, they'd face a hangman's rope. But they signed the pledge. And here is the documented fate of that gallant 56. Carter Braxton of Virginia, wealthy planter, trader, saw his ships swept from the seas. To pay his debts, he lost his home and all of his properties and died in rags. Thomas Lynch Jr., who signed that pledge, was a third-generation rice grower, aristocrat, large plantation owner. After he signed, his health failed. His wife and he set out for France to regain his failing health. Their ship never got to France, was never heard from again. Thomas McKean of Delaware was so harassed by the enemy that he was forced to move his family 5 times in 5 months. He served in Congress without pay, his family in poverty and in hiding. Vandals looted the properties of Ellery and Clymer and Hall and Gwinnett and Walton and Hayward and Rutledge and Middleton. Thomas Nelson Jr. of Virginia raised $2 million on his own signature to provision our allies, the French fleet. After the war, he personally paid back the loans, wiped out his entire estate, and he was never reimbursed by his government. In the final battle for Yorktown, Nelson urged General Washington to fire on his, Nelson's, own home, which was occupied by Cornwallis. It was destroyed. Thomas Nelson Jr. had pledged his life, his fortune, and his sacred honor. The Hessians seized the home of Francis Hopkinson of New Jersey. Francis Lewis had his home and everything destroyed, his wife imprisoned. She died within a few months. Richard Stockton, who signed that declaration, was captured, mistreated, his health broken to the extent that he died at 51. His estate was pillaged. Thomas Hayward Jr. was captured when Charleston fell. John Hart was driven from his wife's bedside while she was dying. Their 13 children fled in all directions for their lives. His fields and grist mill were laid waste. For more than a year he lived in forests and caves and returned home after the war to find his wife dead, his children gone, his properties gone, and he died a few weeks later of exhaustion and a broken heart. Lewis Morris saw his land destroyed, his family scattered. Philip Livingston died within a few months from the hardships of the war. John Hancock, history remembers best due to a quirk of fate rather than anything he stood for, that great sweeping signature attesting to his vanity, towers over the others, one of the wealthiest men in New England. And yet he stood outside Boston one terrible night of the war, and he said, "Burn Boston, though it makes John Hancock a beggar, if the public good requires it." So he too lived up to the pledge. Of the 56, few were long to survive. 5 were captured by the British and tortured before they died. 12 had their homes from Rhode Island to Charleston sacked, looted, occupied by the enemy, or burned. 2 lost their sons in the army. 1 had 2 sons captured. 9 of the 56 died in the war from its hardships or from its more merciful bullets. I don't know what impression you had of the men who met that summer in Philadelphia. But I think it's important that we remember this about them. They were not poor men. They were not wild-eyed pirates. These were men of means. They were rich men, most of them. and had enjoyed much ease and luxury in their personal living. Not hungry men, certainly not terrorists, not irresponsible malcontents, not fanatical incendiaries. These men were prosperous men, wealthy landowners. They were substantially secure in their prosperity. They had everything to lose. But they considered liberty, and this is as much as I shall say of it. They had learned that liberty is so much more important than security, that they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. And they fulfilled their pledge. They paid the price, and freedom was born.